All right, and whenever you guys are ready, take it away.
Well, John's still on mute.
I beg your pardon. How's that?
Yeah,
Thank
go
you.
right ahead, John.
Charlie and I are members of an organization. You should see our webpage on the screen here. The Eco Restoration Alliance Network. We are a global network of scientists and storytellers and practitioners who are doing eco restoration work around the world. We happen to be united by the belief that the climate crisis can be addressed by fixing the global air conditioning system. And that can happen pretty quickly compared, say, to decarbonizing the atmosphere, which sadly will take centuries before it actually cools the planet. There's so much carbon in the oceans that even if we were to stop emissions today, it would take hundreds of years for the planet to cool down. And of course, we don't have hundreds of years. We have a decade or two to turn the tide. And in order to do that, we're going to need to engage almost everyone, almost everywhere. The key insight is visible here. And I'm just going to refresh the page so I can just show you that we live on a very big planet. It is a planet covered with water, and water turns out to be the major coolant of the global air conditioning system. But that water doesn't mostly come from the ocean. When it comes to the climate, it comes at least as much from the land, and the land is what we have wrecked, and the land is what we can repair. So, you know, we're all used to seeing these big bands of brown across Africa and increasingly in parts of South America. It didn't used to be that way. That used to be grasslands or forests. And grasslands and forests and other vegetation do something really quite magical. They move huge amounts of water from underground into the atmosphere as energy-laden water vapor. When that water vapor condenses at altitude, the energy that would otherwise have gone into heating and drying the dirt is released up in the air, and much of it radiates out into space. It's an air conditioning system. When it condenses, the heat is released, clouds form, and of course the clouds rehydrate the land and produce the plants, which do the evapotranspiration and basically persist this global air conditioning system. But as we have seen, it's broken, the air conditioning system. And so our effort to try to engage almost everyone, almost everywhere, is to highlight and to celebrate eco-restoration projects all over the world. Charlie, and he's going to talk more about this, is engaged in color coding and classifying the various kinds of projects. But as you can see, there are projects all over the world, and unlike sites like Restore.eco, we're not actually trying to document all of the technical aspects of what's going on. We're focusing on inspiration and aspiration. If we need everyone to take responsibility for their piece of the ground, then we ought to celebrate everyone who is doing that and give them a place where they can show what they're doing. They can see that their contributions are being recognized, and they can show their friends and recruit others to do it. Now, if we were to zoom in to, say, Rochester, New York, you'll see that there are a small number of dots that I happen to have put into the area. One of them is my backyard. Here we are. And now I can admit that while I don't do gardening, my wife is really quite good. And while this backyard, when we moved in here about 10 years ago, used to be mostly bare grass and dirt and a few trees, it's now extremely lush. And I think that's really cool. So I have my place on the big map. Another place in the region is this gas station on South Avenue, which I think does a really good job of showing that even in an urban environment, you can make a real difference, capture a little more water in the soil, support a few more pollinators and birds, and help restore the biodiversity, which restores the climate, as well as all the living things that make the planet work. So that's the basic idea of the big map to save the future. We currently have on the map, as you can see, a few thousand entries. We're going to need, before we're done, a few billion. It's a big planet, but there are a lot of people on the planet. And for every one of them, their future and their offspring's future is at stake here. If they can all recognize that the only solution is to be part of the solution, and that their backyard, their upper 40, their acreage, even their flower pots, collectively are the only thing that can restore the planetary air conditioning. They should be inspired to be on the map, and they should be able to use the map to find other people in their area who are doing this kind of work. That's the logic of what we're doing. I've collected, and Charlie and I have collected, many of these data points from available information on the web. We actually have 6,000 additional entries in the queue that we are migrating over from restore.eco with their permission. But again, we are extracting from the tens of thousands on restore.eco the ones that have inspirational stories about successful eco-restoration projects. Meanwhile, Charlie is working on a classification system for helping filter the projects that involve various techniques. And our website is making it possible for people to say, well, suppose I want to do something like this, what could I do? And so we're bringing together, it's going to be possible to find people who've done Miyawaki forest, people who are doing urban gardens, people who are doing rewilding, and so on. I think that's the overview. We can get into the classification system, but I want to say that one of the reasons I'm grateful for the opportunity to present to you all is because you all are actually doing the work on the ground and working like us to help make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know of many projects that ought to be on the big map, and I want you to recognize that you can go to bigmaptosavethefuture.net, and if you know one place that you want to put there, just fill in a form to add or amend an existing post. But if you know of a bunch of sites, take a look at the big map and you'll see that we don't actually require that much. We need a location, we need a project name, we need a good story, and we need one or more good pictures. If you know some cases of that sort, please be in touch. We'll come up with the simplest possible way for you to make those cases available to us, and we'll get them on the map. I would like to have Victoria and Jonathan's garden in progress. They're redoing their entire yard. And I suspect that each of you is doing something along these lines because it's rewarding. And because you know, if we don't do it, who is going to do it? That's the overview. I guess I'll pause for questions and then we can go into detail as you like.
John, could you just click on a point and show them what they'll get?
Yes, indeed, I should have done that. So if you click on a point on the map, you get the story. In this case, Mills River, North Carolina. If you click on the central panel, it will zoom into that location. And by the way, the other thing we need is a source for more information. So if you click on the button, it will then take you to the original source of that information. In this case, from a website called regen.earth, which has got videos of a few hundred sites that they found. But that's the basic logic. I guess I should review the rest of the interface. We have a number of collections here. We have a Global Earth Repair Hall of Fame with some of the greats from around the world, like Alfred Brownell from Liberia. We have a number of cases that we've just culled from places on the web. We have collections of ERA members, and there's Charles Shore, for example. And there is, by the way, a map as well as a globe. And there's Charlie near Gaithersburg, Maryland. Okay, Charlie, well, what else did you want me to show?
No, I think they get the general picture. I mean, I'd like to go into the database and show them our typology.
Okay.
Want to do questions now, or do you want to wait until after I'm
I guess
done?
let's see where the crowd is at, and
Okay.
and recognize that I know that you all are thinking about various ways of mapping the ecology of the regeneration movement. I'm trying to map one particular aspect of it with a particular end in mind, which is to engage more and more people and help them understand that they're not freaks on their own, but that they have neighbors who they can get advice from and who they can work with in solidarity. I'd be interested in your thoughts about how we might be able to make this useful to the important work that the bioregionalists are doing.
So I think one of the things that we are working on, or that we would like to do, is map regenerative projects in the area in our bioregions. One of the things that we still have to do is determine what really constitutes regenerative. But one of the first steps that we wanted to start taking was developing a place where we can start adding data and information on our bioregions. So I think that one part of that would be what projects are happening in your communities, having links to it. So for your map, you don't have to, there were some things that you added that you haven't necessarily made connections to those partners, right? You found them on the internet, or have you made personal connections with all of them?
No, actually, we do not have personal connections to most of the entries on the map. But as a matter of fact, we are working on collecting contact information for all of these people, letting them know that they're on the map, congratulating them, and giving them a link to their unique entry to encourage them to share that entry on social media and with their friends, with an eye towards getting more people on board. That whole social recruitment side of the map, which is the real point, is much less developed than the technology itself, which, let's face it, means that the technology right now is cool, but not really making a big contribution. We hope to address that, and we would love your help doing it.
I might say too that a number of the sites are commercial sites, and usually farms that sell their produce. And so I think one thing we should mention to them is that they get free advertising from us. In addition to, spreading the knowledge of how and why they did what they did.
And indeed, another possibility that we've explored is that it's not clear that there's a yellow pages, a directory of businesses that support this movement. It would be a natural and I think a real contribution to add them to the map. It might become a revenue source, but in any case, it would help people who want to do this know who they can contact and work with and get supplies from and so on in their area. So Anna, you mentioned that you're struggling with the question of how do we classify regenerative, how do we recognize regenerative sites and what kinds of variations do we have? We're also dealing with that. I'm casting a fairly broad net here.
Yeah.
If they're improving the quality of the land, improving it from a point of view of increasing vegetation, decreasing heat, increasing moisture, all of those things, then it counts. But within that, we then want to come up with a good classification system that will help people recognize the range of ways, the variety of techniques, everything from hugelkultur to vertical farming, say, that might make a contribution and help them pick and choose among them. And maybe that's a good opportunity for Charlie to talk about the database and how he's helping to get it organized.
Sure. I would add to that, John, that we're also starting to include topics like conservation, which is not a necessarily direct restoration process, but obviously is important to the maintenance of a biological balance, which ultimately feeds into the entire holistic picture. So let me share my screen here. And I'll go into the actual data. Find it here. So our database is a Google spreadsheet that has evolved over the past year to contain a variety of information. In addition to the project name, we list the primary source, and then the description actually usually takes information from several different types of social media, internet stuff, Facebook. So we take a lot of information from that, with the idea that what we're think that we're doing is having the individual proprietor or practitioner tell his own story, his or her own story. Okay, that's why it's like John said before. This is why it's different than a site like Restore, which is much more technical in its approach. Now, we've come up with two types here, and the dominant type is the one that is associated. It's the primary ones associated with that organization. This is their primary activity, and you see there's an awful lot of agroecology here. When you saw the map, these are the dominant type of the ones that showed up as being color coded. Okay. Now, one thing that I have thought about just this weekend, originally we had a type field, and the type field included the dominant type. But obviously, many of these sites are not exclusive for one type of activity. So what I think I'm going to do with this field is make this a secondary type field and put in, as you can see, education, scientific research, and eco-restoration beyond agriculture. This is eco-restoration that has nothing to do with agriculture. And so I have 10 of these dominant types listed. And I just came up with these types just by reading the article, reading the post, and kind of getting an idea for what people are doing. At some point, I should define what each one of these are. Now, what I would like to do, uh, if you look at the big map, like John was saying, right now, we have 7 institutions that have contributed, very kindly contributed information to our group. And John has set up a search function to, based upon those 7 groups. My concern was that we should have a second search function for the end user. The end user would be the practitioner, the person who's actually going to be doing the work. So my thought was, if somebody searches on agroecology, they're going to get 1,000 hits. I don't want that. The person would be able to, or even automatically, the dominant type would be able to pick out those points where agroecology is the dominant type. But the user also has the ability to indicate whether he wants one of these secondary types put in. So that's the second part of the search. Now, the really cool part, in my opinion, is this. I don't know how familiar you are with the IUCN, but they have a global ecosystem typology, which is based exclusively on biotic criteria. There's no geophysical criteria. I think it's a little bit of a liability, but their typology has something around, well, if you look at their hierarchy, they have like 6 different levels of typology. One of them is biome. I'm sure you're familiar with that term. The one below that is functional groups, which is the one that I've been focusing on. If you explore, for example, if you explore the terrestrial, you can see that they have all these coded areas. And if I click on one, well, somewhere, I mean, it provides a map. It provides a global map of all the shrublands and shrubby woodlands in that biome. There we go. These are subsets. These are the functional groups of those biomes. And as you can see, they've provided nice polygon maps of those different biomes. My proposal is, if we can talk to IUCN, if you're not familiar with GIS, a point feature just has a shape field of some sort. It just has an X and a Y coordinate. A polygon field has a series of X and Y coordinates. If you zoom into these, well, let me zoom out again. If you zoom in, each one of these little points is called a vertex, and each of those vertices are represented in the polygon feature class. Okay. So my point is that if somebody wants to start a new project, but they don't know where or how to start, if they could provide us with their latitude and longitude, and I can get this IUCN information, the georeference information, I can determine what functional group that point belongs into. Okay. And in that sense, so it narrows down the number of, in other words, we want the user to be in roughly the same functional group as the areas right around him. We also want him to be at plus or minus 10 degrees latitude from where he sits. So that is the plan. The caveats are, it may not, I don't know how willing IUCN is to give up their georeferenced information. That's part of the problem. And
Well,
the
we
other
can
part
certainly-
is, right now we have the lowest level of GIS that as we offer is that's ArcGIS Online. Whether or not this is doable in that software is still up in the air. I'm not really sure. It's called a point and polygon type function that we're looking at.
Charlie, we can
Um,
certainly use their classification system, which looks very well thought out and provide links to information about the various biomes, even if we don't include their mapping data directly into our map.
Sorry. Yeah,
So-
yeah, and of course, you know, these typologies are they're often criticized. They're not perfect. There's a lot of variation within them. But by being able to take these four criteria, the primary type, the secondary type, the latitude, and the functional group, the user will have a much better idea which sites to use for an analogous process. And you know, once we do that, we'll highlight those points and have them take it from there. Now, John, Dr. John, lives to code. And so this is his next challenge.
Right. So we'll have to see how this comes together, but that's
Yeah.
in part to be shaped by how people can actually use it. So I want to go back to this group and say that we do have the technology platform. We would love to get your help adding to the map, but we'd love to be able to help you create your own collection. If you need a variation of this, just to classify your own information, we could probably help with that. And I would imagine that eventually we'd be able to harvest some of the data for our larger project. But I think that groups all over the world need to do what you're trying to do. And if we can help you get that done, we are potentially at your service.
So I guess my first question to you is, based upon John and my description, how do you see our work fitting in with yours?
So I think for one thing, it would be I think potentially we could have the projects that we find linked to this put on this map, which would serve the purpose of being able to make the regenerative projects in our bioregions available. I'm also thinking though, like even having maps that show the functional groups of the functional topography of the landscapes of our individual bioregions. I'd be interested in just developing maps like that. Like what are the functional topographies of the greater Rochester area and the Finger Lakes? Are they all is it homogeneous? Is it heterogeneous? Yeah.
Well, you know, I would say this, that what you're looking for is already out there from a number of different sources. And as I said before, we don't, this particular source doesn't give you the geophysical, but you can go to the USGS, for example, and they have all kinds of topographic and type of features. So, you know, really, it's really all out there now. It's just a matter of, you know, putting it on your map and using it. How are you going to use it?
You know, I should say that a simple way to start on this would be, I mean, we can give you the format for the entire access to our spreadsheet and its rows and columns. But it's pretty obvious, right? If you have one column for project name, a column for location, a description of the project, and a link to a picture, and a link that people can go for more information, that's about enough for us to add them onto the map, quite simply. And with the filters that we're talking about, we can facilitate the process of having a view of that data that is just the entries that you put in if you want to be able to filter to talk about your own particular work. So collecting the data in a structured format in a Google spreadsheet would be a good way to begin. When you've gotten far enough to where you'd like some help getting it on a map, I may, suggest shuffling the rows and columns around, but get 10 or 20 entries and we'll see what we can do together.
Great. And actually, if you wanted to send me that layout, that would be great, but you're right, it is pretty simple. I have made Google spreadsheets that are available on the Earth Regenerator site for each of our bioregions already. They are not formatted in any way. They're just generic spreadsheets that I wanted to start to format depending on how we want to collect information. So I think that if we could use this, if you were able to send me that, I could put that into all of our Google Drives, and I can just really quick share my screen to show everybody where they would find that.
Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna just copy. I'm gonna create a fresh sheet for you, which will have the columns that we use. I'm gonna bold the columns that we really care about.
I just wanted to show one more thing here that I just found out yesterday, in fact. They give you a polygon tool here. So let's say, okay, we're in Louisiana here someplace, and we want to start a new location. With this tool, it will be different on our map, but with this tool, you can draw a figure, and then let's see. I forget how this is done, but anyway, there's a way of showing all the functional groups that are associated with that particular area. Of course, this is a large area. There'd be a lot of functional groups, but in a smaller area or just a point feature, you'd be pretty restricted as to how many functional groups, and you want to limit as much as possible how many functional groups are involved with that. Now, I'm going to tell you right now firsthand, drawing polygons is very expensive in time and patience, and it would be better if I've got 50 polygons on the site right now on the big map. It would be better if we could get the functional groups for entire polygons, because it's going to vary over, if you've got a 700 hectare field, it's going to vary somewhat over that area. But right now, I think to start off with, we would just use the points to determine which functional groups would be involved.
Great.
So I've given you the skeleton with a few sample entries just so you can see what we've got. As ever, I think you should start simply. But if you can collect some beginning data, then we can see how we can make it as frictionless as possible. And as Charlie points out, if you can help us find the outlines of these plots, we would love to add them in. But that's a more time-consuming process. I believe in sort of getting something useful started before we work on the complicated long-term stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So this is the Earth Regenerators page where we are holding our, this is where I post the recordings and the notes. So in this post here, I have added our Google Drive.
Mhm.
So you guys should all be able to access this, and I made it one for each region. This is just a general mapping resources. So if we find GIS tools or anything that we would like to keep somewhere, it can live in this one. But if we open up Buffalo, just some of the ideas that we had and that we've discussed in the past are physical features of our watershed, the source, the mouth, where it leads into. I have not formatted that at all yet. Same thing, you know, degradation challenges. So what I kind of foresee is that as we start thinking about what we want to add, how we want to add it, we can start formulating these pages, and then anybody in any bioregion or cross bioregions could come in and add whatever they want to these spreadsheets. And but yeah, so I'll set up the regenerative projects area similar to what you shared with us, John.
Great.
And Anna, let me reemphasize, Anna and everybody, let me reemphasize that, you know, I showed you one of the biotic maps that are based upon biota, but there's a whole host of maps that show topographic rock features and all kinds of things that are out there for free or for very little. So, you know, rather than reinventing the wheel, I just start with something like that, if that's what you need.
Let me ask a question of the 3, 6, 9 people who are not me in this meeting. Are you personally involved in rewilding or eco-restoration projects on your own property or places that you work with? Raise your hand if you are. I know about Jonathan, Victoria, Anna, Peter, Marshall. Well, I'm going to put my email in here and would really be very happy if you would pop me a note saying, here's a description of what I'm doing. Make it colorful and inspiring. Here's a picture or more of what I'm doing, or here's a Facebook social media post we did. Here's the location. You can give it as precisely as you want. We'll put down a pin if you give us a location. And we'll put you there, give you a link back. You can share it with your friends and buddies. You can encourage other people to do it. But I think this is likely to be what it takes. If you're doing good work, I would love to celebrate your work and help you persuade other people that it's the most important thing they can do.
I think it's terrific, and the simplicity of it, you know, is what makes it engaging. It's not hard. Everybody wants to do something, and once they get into it and do it for themselves, and they're going to want to do other projects. But I think it's great. The one thing that I would love is that if somebody who's really good at graphics and the interface and you know, we have probably lots of people in ER and the design school that could make it really fun in the visual way as well as it is.
I'd welcome a graphic overhaul. That'd be great.
Yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
know
I've
someone
never
who's-
heard. Yeah, I've heard you talk about it in general, but this time I really got the distinctive difference that you're trying to make, and you know, keeping it simple, and at some point that maybe there are other layers of depth.
Absolutely.
So Eric has his hand up, and Eric's got a project, and Eric's in Rochester. Oh, Eric has had his hand up for a long time.
Peter
I don't
also
know.
has his hand up.
I know, but Eric had it up before, I think. I'm not sure.
Eric, Eric, you're on mute.
Okay, Peter is unmuted. His hand is up. I think he's going to say something now.
So, yeah, thank you for that presentation and thank you for the invitation to submit to the database, John. I think I could do that from my backyard where I'm sitting right now with our tree planting and our farming, if you want to call it that. I really like to put the Cleveland Clinic or University Hospitals or some other organizations. I think I'm having a little challenge with A, knowing at what scale we want to have entries, and B, what counts as regenerative. And we don't have to talk about that now. You've already you've already talked about those issues. I put my hand up though, because NOACA, which is our Northeastern Ohio Area Coordinating Agency, is doing a climate action plan, and they already have an ArcGIS project for mapping. So it does seem to me that connecting to organizations that are already going to scale with mapping, in addition to taking individual entries, ought to be part of our thinking, both in Cleveland, but also in terms of the Great Lakes Basin and your larger project.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you can make an introduction, all I need is permission, and I will pull the data off of their platform. I didn't mention that one of the things that we've got is about 400 entries from Manga Bay, which is a very good publication if you don't know it on the web. I found 400 eco-restoration success stories just by searching their archive of 30,000 articles for the phrase success story. I hope to have thousands of their entries, which are very nicely illustrated and written articles from all over the world, on the map on an ongoing basis. And other groups like Restore are now starting to give us permission for this kind of thing as well. So the trick is, I think, each of these other sites that we've talked about are mapping projects for their own purposes. There's no particular reason why the data, once collected, should be restricted to only one collection and not reused. I think these stories need to be told lots of ways.
And Peter,
Well, and I guess I wanted.
I was going to.
Sorry, just a clarification. I don't mean to imply that all the organizations that I'm talking about are doing regenerative projects. So part of the problem is identifying what project doing that we can. Sorry, I meant to raise your expectations too high, Jim. Sorry for anything.
Okay, well, you've got my email.
Peter, I was going to say, I worked as a GIS analyst for about 12 years. If you ever need if you have problems with scaling or something like that, just let me know.
Yeah, I'll comment. I have my hand up. Coincidentally, about a week ago, actually, I posted on Big Map, Stonehenge Gardens, which is 21 acres regenerative. And my thought was when I did that, this is great. I wonder how we relate as a region. So this is very pertinent. And I like what Anna talked about. I can see how in our own bioregion, to see something done in other bioregions will really help us encourage people to put up their sites. We have in our little collective about 100 different posters who are familiar with one another. I would say probably 30 to 40% of those are regenerative as it is. So yeah, I think we can multiply the effect of this over time. I like what you're doing. I like what Anna has said too. I think that's a good way of collecting in common.
Thank you for submitting. I have a feeling you didn't get an acknowledgement. That's something we need to build in. We ought to give immediate feedback and make a point of prioritizing people who take the time and trouble to do that. But we'll get to you. Did you say it was called Stonehenge?
Yes. I did get some kind of an acknowledgement that it was accepted. I didn't see it on the map yet. Yeah, I did get an email back.
Okay, that's good. That could be it.
Anybody else have any other comments? We got a shy group here.
Mhm.
I put a comment in the chat that
Oh, okay.
there are, I would love to be able to help get people in their projects here around Cleveland or the southern shore of Lake Erie onto the map there and immediately begin pointing to that map as places that, the regenerative work that's being done. So I think that'll be quicker than any other way.
think
And
that's
I'm just
great.
I still haven't seen any type of like directory. It doesn't mean they're not here. I just haven't seen one, so.
Well, Google Maps and some of these other sites have local mayors, people who take responsibility for a region and then try to build a community around it. You should feel free to step up and say, I want to try to make a test case of Cleveland. You can show us how to do it.
Well, I can try. I don't know about mayor, but okay, thank you. Thanks for putting this together. It's very
Thank you.
inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. And John and Charlie, I'm wondering if, would you mind either you can send it to me or add it to that Mighty Networks group. I'd love to hear about some of the resources or the websites that you're pulling a lot of these things from, because I wonder if, like the Monterey Bay, or what was the
Manga
name?
Bay.
Manga
Manga Bay.
Bay. Like, I'm just wondering if some of these, I'm sure that you've gone through them very thoroughly, but I'm wondering if we could, yeah, right. So a lot of these resources might already contain projects and be a database that we should individually look at when we're looking to build up Lansing, Michigan and Cleveland. And because I'm sure that you have not looked, you might have looked at for Rochester, but you haven't looked in all these other places. So I feel like, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those things too, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Sure,
And then when you see an article that you said this should be on the map, just pop it our way and we'll get it onto the map.
And is that the easiest way to do that, is to email you?
Well, there's a button on the big map itself. I'll share my screen again.
Okay.
So here we are, here's the big map. There are two big buttons here. One is donate to help make it happen, and you're welcome to click that button. The other one is nominate new entries. And if you want to add a profile for single project, site, or person, it's a pretty straightforward form. You give it a name, you give us a link, you give us a description. It can be as simple as a couple of sentences, but more is appreciated. You give it a location, and you give it at least one picture. And this gives some instructions about how you can add a picture to it using this thing below. You can click add file, and then you can upload a picture. And when you click submit, it goes into a spreadsheet from which we will then harvest and massage it into an entry on the map. But as I say, if you, that's great for single entries. If you come up with a collection, it may be easier for you to create some kind of a bulk table. And it's as easy for us to go through your bulk table as it is to go through the entries one by one. So if you get a bunch, put it in a nice format, let's compare notes.
And that can be, if we want to start adding them to our spreadsheet, you can either do it individually or you can add it to our bioregional spreadsheets that I just showed you.
There's, I'm really surprised. There's hundreds of thousands of sites that we could add here. And it's very inspirational. I never realized how much this was going on. And where you really see it is in the tropics, the global south, because they're the ones who are getting most impacted. I don't know if you've heard of the Great Green Wall, but they're building an entire green infrastructure. It's south of in the Sahel, just south of the Sahara, to keep the Sahara from spreading. And most of this is being done by people who are living, a lot of times living in a subsistence living to start off with, and often being threatened or even killed. So I always tell people, you can do this in your backyard. It's not going to cost you anything. It'll cost you a little money, but it's not going to cost you your life like these guys. So I encourage people to do as much as you can on restoring our biosphere.
And one of the points that we have to get across, and I don't think we're doing it quite right yet, is that, of course, the people who are doing it typically are doing it not just to save the planet or the future. They're
Yeah.
also doing it to improve their livelihoods and lives. There are people who are taking desolate ground and turning it into ground that they can live off. If they do it the right way, they can get a real living from it and use less pesticides, prevent flooding, cool the environment near them, and, by the way, contribute to cooling the whole damn planet. So there's a local win and a global win. And frankly, we're not going to get there unless people recognize that those both converge at eco-restoration.
Kim, you want to go?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we've connected or reconnected with Paul Baines from the Great Lakes Commons recently, because remember when he came to the one meeting, he offered to share contacts, maps, all kinds of things. So, it might be nice to reach back out to him.
That's very true. Yeah, one of our initial meetings, Paul Baines from the Great Lakes Commons joined. So that's a good point. I can reach back out to him.
Please, that'd be great.
All right,
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Eric.
Well,
Thanks, everybody.
thank
Yeah,
you.
Peter. Yeah, so I think if nobody else has any questions or anything, I'd see that Katie joined. Nice to meet you, Katie. I'm not sure if you want to just give us let us know where you're from, where you're joining from, if you're from the Great Lakes or not.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, I'm sorry I'm coming in late. I'm just still working here. So I had planned to come in and just do it on the side, but something came up. So at least I caught most of you. I'm Katie. I'm in Hamilton, in Ontario. So sort of in the middle of this bioregion, I think, in a certain way. And I got looped in, I think probably around January of this year, just from coming across the current work the Legacy Project was doing on activating the bioregion, bringing Joan Penny and all of that, and then managed to go and see one of their talks while they were in Toronto. So I've been really loving just kind of jumping in and out whenever I can and getting some energy from all of you. And so I wanted to do that today. And whenever it makes sense to, I think, get involved more substantially, then I'm kind of waiting here in the wings. So I just wanted to come in and say hi.
Nice to meet you. If you
Yes.
missed my presentation, to make a long story short, if you're working on some kind of regenerative project, I would love to add your data to the big map to save the future, the URL of which is showing up in the chat now. That
Right.
was the subject of today's presentation.
Oh, thank you, John. I'll get on that.
And if you could
Maybe. And
Apologies
Charlie's
too,
working on
right.
that too.
I'm-
Katie, feel free to share your skill sets, the things that you would like to be tapped when there's a need come up that you could make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess that in my job, I work with a organization that's all about policy advocacy, which is the United States on soil health in particular. So it's called Land Corps, and we're just looking at how can soil health be integrated into federal policy. And it's an interesting angle to take because seems like it's slightly different from saying climate smart agriculture or, local food systems or what. Soil health is something that lands very well in a bipartisan way. So sort of across the aisle, you can say, well, this is what we have to do for rural development, for revitalizing our communities, for making farming viable, and then for all of the co-benefits that come with just building soil health. And so I think that I'm happy to help on framing. That's what we do really, it's just in framing. And well, not just, but that's part of it. And just making sure that people who are doing the work, who can actually make a difference and who have some land under management, that their needs are being brought, but sometimes they don't have time, right, to come and talk to policymakers and all that kind of thing. So it's making sure that if they can't come and be in the room, then what they wanted to say is at the table.
Cool.
That would be one thing.
Can you put your contact information, your email, and
Sure.
maybe the URL? That would be helpful.
Thank you.
Katie, I just wanted to
And,
ask if you also advocate for providing subsidies for regenerative farmers.
Yes, we do. I think that we advocate for especially making building soil health viable, and economically would be a huge way that has to happen, because making the shift costs, and some of the financial barriers are the big ones that are stopping people from doing it. So yeah, we would advocate for whether that's going to be through grants, through cost share programs, through loans, through making adjustments to loans. So we have a proposal now that's looking at, well, could farmers defer, if they have a loan, could they defer part of the payment if they agree to put that into soil health practices? And then also looking at what can crop insurance do? So crop insurance is a huge program in the States that the government spends a ton of money subsidizing, and not always subsidizing or advantaging farmers that are actually building soil health and reducing risk for the government at the end of the day. And so what we would say is, do we want to keep seeing the cost of the crop insurance program going up? Is that what we really want to see? Or do we want to be incentivizing farmers to be doing things that reduce their own risk and, make the program more sustainable in the long term? So it would be a combination of subsidies and other kinds of supports. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Really, really great.
Yeah, and Katie, just so you know, I put a link in the chat to our Mighty Networks page where the recordings from this and other meetings are available, as well as notes and some resources for this group too. So feel free to join.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks everybody for joining. And if nobody
Yeah.
has any other questions, we can end for today, and we'll see you all next week.
Will do. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you.
Good evening.